What's unique about Heliogen is the fact that we use a combination of artificial intelligence along with novel hardware combined to make a solution that up-levels our ability to do this with concentrated solar and thermal.
At a 30,000 foot level, if you're at a dinner party or, at RE Plus having networking conversations with folks that maybe don't know much about your background or what you're trying to accomplish, how do you describe the problem that you all have created Heliogen to solve?
Yes. Climate change is the greatest challenge ahead of us as humans. I could honestly think of no greater area to be putting our effort and blood, sweat, and tears into at this point. Notwithstanding all of the great work that goes on in poverty alleviation and what have you. But the biggest challenge ahead of us is to reduce emissions and get to net zero. So that is the challenge that I think we're focused on solving here at Heliogen. Over half of all of climate change related emissions is caused by a set of sectors related to transportation, industry, and energy consumption. And those emissions, in many cases, there are lots of companies that are looking to do something about those, but there's a whole subsector where there is not really a place that's addressed, and that's industrial emissions. And that's the challenge that Heliogen is really focused on.
So for those who are unfamiliar with the company, can you introduce us to Heliogen and why specifically this company is going to help alleviate the problem that you've just enunciated?
Absolutely. So Heliogen is all about industrial decarbonization, and we have a unique technology solution to it. I think people are generally familiar with solar PV and wind as examples of renewable energy and ways of powering the world that don't burn fossil fuels. What Heliogen's technology does is it takes the fundamental aspects of thermal energy from the sun, as opposed to the electrical side of that, which is solar PV. It takes solar thermal energy and concentrates that and leverages that thermal energy to deploy it into multiple forms. And so we can use it in its native form as heat or as steam. Mm-hmm. We can add a turbine to produce power. We can also do things like adding an electrolyzer to produce hydrogen. And so Heliogen's technology, what makes it unique, because concentrated solar thermal exists elsewhere in the world already. There are already examples of where this is deployed globally at commercial and industrial scale. What's unique about Heliogen is the fact that we use a combination of artificial intelligence along with novel hardware combined to make a solution that up-levels our ability to do this with concentrated solar thermal.
Yeah, and for those who haven't gone to the Heliogen website, it's a heliostat, effectively. I may be using the terminology improperly, and I'll let you help us with all of the lexicon that we need for this, and we'll dig deep into that later on in the interview as well. I have a whole section on specifically the language that we use to enable these technologies to move. But concentrating solar is not something that most of our peers are thinking about right now. When many of us, you included, were getting into the industry, late aughts, early teens, Ivanpah had been built, many examples, a dozen or more in Spain and around the world, stood as examples of sort of refinement in how concentrating solar works and can be used. Companies like SolFocus also tried taking different approaches, and we could name on and on. One question that stands out for me is why now is the time to rethink concentrating solar? Isn't flat plate solar already addressing the needs that we have for harnessing the sun?
Oh, what a great question. So maybe let me first, if it's okay, give people a little bit of background on what concentrated solar is.
Yeah.
The concentrated solar energy, it basically, in a nutshell, it offers a very efficient, cost-effective solution to decarbonize with long-duration energy storage. And these are previously untouched areas that can help industrial operations. When most people think of solar energy, we talked about, they think of solar PV. But what concentrated solar energy is, it's essentially a field of mirrors. And you're right, we call them heliostats, which basically just means mirrors that track the sun. And this field of mirrors basically behaves like a huge magnifying glass. Those mirrors reflect and focus the sunlight onto what we call a receiver at the top of a tower. And this is all made of materials that can absorb heat at very high temperatures. And at the end of that, there can be various forms of storage. There are forms of storage that are commercially available. There are ones that are in development. But in any case, the forms of storage then take the heat and store it in a storage medium, and then you can dispatch it and release it when the sun isn't shining. And therefore, it solves the challenge of intermittency, which is faced by other types of renewable energy.
Gotcha. So what I heard you say is that concentrating solar, because it allows us to magnify the sun's power, gives us a chance to simultaneously harness the sun and store the power in one unit, effectively in one conversion cycle. Is that right?
Exactly. I mean, the
Okay.
beauty of it is, especially if you're using to apply for heat, there's no conversion loss, which you would face if you started with electricity first and then converted to heat. It's
Yeah.
also not, as we mentioned, a brand new technology. It exists and has been deployed at scale many places all over the world.
It was the first application of harnessing sunlight, was reflecting the sun and actually using it to heat elements in many different forms, and among them water.